Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Woohoo! It is so exciting to be back here on this incredibly ridiculous stage. It's absolutely insane how beautiful this is, and I'm really grateful for all of you joining here today, and I'm also grateful for the organizers for this conference. So I want to make sure that we give them just another round of applause for bringing everyone together today and for the next 3 days in this wonderful venue. And then I also want you to get into the habit of kind of applauding for the next speakers as well. But before them, I want you to give a round of applause to yourselves. You showed up today, you're here, and you have the next 3 days to learn, and you're giving yourself that space to do that. So huge round of applause to all of you for being here. As Alex mentioned, I'm an engineering manager on the Angular team, and my primary focus is on the core framework and tooling. And some of you might know that I've also been here in 2018, which was the first edition of frontendlove. And back then, I also talked about Angular. So joining the Angular team last year has been one of those types of career milestones that I've been looking forward to, and I'm super excited to be here to be representing the team as well. And today we're going to talk a bit about the work that we're doing to accelerate developer experience in Angular. And we're going to start with a story. It's about the American Air Force back in the 1950s. Pilots were having trouble controlling their aircraft, and incidents were on the rise. And they couldn't understand what was going on. They looked at the skills, they looked at the tech. Nothing was coming up, really, until they looked at the cockpit. And what was interesting about the cockpit was that it was created for the average person. But who is the average person? What they discovered is that in trying to fit the average person, it actually didn't fit anyone. And once they made this discovery, they redesigned the controls in the cockpit to be adjustable so that they meet the unique needs of their pilots. And that really laid the foundation of expanding the Air Force to women and building a more diverse and inclusive workforce as well. So you might be wondering, how does that apply to Angular, actually? Angular is a very opinionated framework, and we know that that's one of our strengths. But we know that each of you, like the pilots in the story, you have a different set of problems that you need to solve, and a different set of tools that you love using, as well as a different set of customer needs that you need to be serving. So just as the Air Force made those controls extensible and flexible, in the same way, we're building into the framework knobs so that developers can use it in the best way that fits their exact needs. And we want to meet developers where they are and reduce the friction of building great experiences on the web. One way in which we're doing that, and one of the first steps in doing that, is actually understanding what those needs are and really listening to what are some of the problems that you all have. And for those of you that have filled the annual developer survey, thank you so much for doing so. The results that we're looking at right now are actually the ones from the previous year, but we've just opened up the annual survey for 2023 or 2022, and it's available on the website as well, the angular.io. So please go check it out and submit your feedback. To our knowledge, this is one of the largest surveys out there with over 20,000 participants. And I want you all to know that we take this survey very, very seriously, and it usually influences our framework's roadmap. So if we dive a bit into the data, we see that you all are very happy with the productivity that Angular gives you. And you also are very happy with how you're able to keep up with Angular releases, as well as the UI components toolkit that comes with Angular and the tooling. But we also notice that there's opportunities for improvement. Specifically here, we're looking at debugging and profiling. So our team rolled up their sleeves and started working on this particular item. And over the past few months, we collaborated with the Chrome DevTools team to launch improvements to the debugging experience directly in Chrome DevTools. People from both teams worked together to enable developers to debug and profile web applications from the authoring perspective, in terms of the language and the source language and project structure, with access to information that is familiar and relevant to the authors themselves. When debugging applications using Chrome DevTools, authors generally want to see just their code, not that of the framework underneath or some dependency tucked away in a node modules folder. So you can see here that I'm searching for app component, and the first few entries in the list in this open dialog, they actually give me code that's related either to the framework or some of the dependencies that I have in my project, and app component is really the last one on the list there. And that's what I'm actually looking for. So to achieve this goal of retrieving what's relevant to the authors, the DevTools team has introduced an extension to source maps that's called Google Ignore List. And this extension is used to identify third-party sources such as framework code or bundler-generated code. And when a framework uses this extension, authors now automatically avoid code that they don't want to see or step through. And I'm explicitly saying when a framework, because this is available for all other frameworks to implement as well and to improve that debugging and profiling experience as well. In practice, Chrome DevTools can automatically hide code identified as third-party in stack traces, in the sources tree, and the quick open dialog, as well as improving the stepping and resuming behavior in the debugging. So you can see here, again, another example where there's a lot of, like I have a 404 error, there's a lot of call frames here. Only one of them is actually related to the code that I've authored. The other ones, for those of you that are familiar with Angular, have a lot to do with the core of the framework and Zone.js, which is something that it's not really our responsibility to debug. It's mostly the framework authors that should be looking into that. As a result of these improvements, you can see that we now have much more relevant stack traces that give us the context of the code that we've actually authored. The same applies to the call stacks that you see while you're debugging and stepping through your code. And another area related to debugging and profiling and, in general, error messages, the other feedback that we heard was that sometimes the error messages aren't very clear. So the team spent actually a significant amount of time just understanding what are some of the common errors that cause confusion. And we spent some time aggregating that by going to Google search results or going on Stack Overflow. We even saw people posting about this error on Quora. That's a good place to do it. And then we categorized these errors using error code. We wrote detailed error reference pages on angular.io, and we also worked with folks at fireship.io to record a set of videos for the visual learners out there. And we link to these error pages in the error stack trace as well. How many of you are familiar with the expression changed after checked? I can see probably 30% of the room raising their hands. It's one of the most common error messages, and rest assured, we're working to make that even more clear or maybe remove it in the future. Going back to the survey, another clear area of improvement is actually testing. We see it, it's the last down there. In Angular v12, we added support for 3 popular end-to-end testing frameworks, including Cypress, Nightwatch, and WebDriver.io. And for my friend Debbie, we also have support for Playwright in the form of a migration guide. Currently, new projects in Angular that run ng end-to-end will walk developers through choosing one of the integrated end-to-end frameworks. And these tools support custom builders and schematics, which automatically update your project's configuration so that it can integrate with your Angular applications. Furthermore, in Angular 14, based on community feedback that we collected via the request for comments process, we've decided to deprecate Protractor, while also working with the community to find a long-term solution for active projects that wish to continue using Protractor. We do understand that some of the teams might not be ready to migrate away of Protractor at the moment. In fact, that's also the case for some of the teams that we work with at Google as well. So we've partnered with the independent team at Hero Devs, who will be creating a fork of Protractor and maintaining it long term. We also understand that end-to-end testing is only part of the testing story. So going into this year, one of our main priorities is investigating the challenges with unit testing in Angular and improving the developer experience there as well. So please send us your feedback. Don't forget about the Angular dev survey and add your input there. All right, shifting gears a bit, we also hear that you are excited about native tooling and faster build times for your dev and production environments. And currently, Angular uses Webpack as a bundler. We then use ESBuild for code optimizations like function inlining, and then Cursor for further code compression. And while this configuration is performant, with the recent evolution of tools like ESBuild, Vite, we think we can do better. So last year, we introduced experimental support for ESBuild-based system for ngBuild, which compiles to ESM pure output. And it also includes support for watch mode and your dev workflow. And over this coming months, we're looking to make ESBuild, to bring ESBuild support in Angular to stable, and kind of get feature parity there with what you currently can do using Webpack. And just to give you an example, okay, I hear some people being very excited about that. I want to give you the numbers as well. So you can see here on the left-hand side, I'm running ngBuild in a project using the currently stable build pipeline. And on the right-hand side, I've configured a new project to use ESBuild. And you can see that the first project takes about 7.1 seconds for the cold build, while the ESBuild-based project takes about 3.67 seconds. And this is consistent with our findings that with ESBuild, we have 57% faster cold builds, which is really exciting. You can enable this today in your projects by editing angular.json and replacing build Angular :browser with Angular browser -ESBuild. But remember, this feature is experimental at the moment, so please give it a try and share feedback with us on GitHub. The other main theme or strong theme that we talk about is reducing the learning curve for Angular, or like simplifying the developer experience for Angular. And one way to do that is by reducing the number of concepts that developers need to learn early in their journey. And that's why we've worked on making ng modules optional. As you can see in this Hello World application that you can see just here, in order to get started with the simplest application, developers need to write a component, they need to declare it in an ng module, and they need to bootstrap that application. This can be a lot of information for a new user that's just getting started, either with their web dev journey or just getting started with Angular. And one potential area of confusion that all of you that haven't used Angular maybe might already ask yourselves is like, what is the difference between ng module and JavaScript modules? And in fact, we ended up writing a guide that kind of walks you through those differences. And furthermore, the ng modules API surface can be quite complex, and it has multiple responsibilities. It includes compile time configuration through the declarations array, as well as runtime configuration for dependency injection through the providers. And it's also responsible for composability and grouping through the imports and exports arrays. We know that ng modules are a great way to organize your application and really separate the concerns of the different pieces of code that you're building or different pieces of application that you're building. And over time, many, many patterns have emerged, and we see different types of modules being used in production. And these are all great tools and great mental models to use for more complex applications. But we really wanted to explore what a simplified experience would actually look like. So that's where the Angular team spent quite a bit of time on making ng modules optional within the framework and introducing the standalone APIs. And we call them standalone components, directives, and pipes. Getting started with Angular using standalone components is as simple as writing your component and then bootstrapping your application. And you can see that this requires a lot less concepts or less concepts to have to learn in the beginning. And even from a code perspective, there's clearly a reduction in the surface area there. And one of the side effects of standalone is now that components are now the smallest unit of reuse, and you can directly lazy load your component. This simplifies a lot of the use cases related to the router as well. And rewriting some of the router APIs to add support for standalone, it actually enabled us to shave off 11% of the router bundle in cases in which you might not be using some of these APIs. And to be clear, the goal is not to remove ng modules, but rather to enable a getting started experience that doesn't require folks to learn ng modules until maybe later in their journey. And we made sure that standalone works really well with ng module-based applications, and that you can easily import ng modules in standalone applications and the other way around. So interoperability between the two types of applications and the two types of components was actually one of the most important principles as we started designing these APIs. Apart from simplifying the learning experience, standalone also allows us to ship some features that we weren't able to do before. So one of them being the Directive Composition API, which enables you to compose behavior from one or more directives into a single directive. Previously, folks would either have to write TypeScript mixins to be able to do that, or they would have to write error-prone code that had, they had to duplicate code and use directives in multiple places. But with the Directive Composition API, basically, host directives tells Angular that whenever a menu with tooltip, as we see it in the code here, is created, then the CDK tooltip and the CDK menu directives will also be applied to that directive as well. If you want to learn more about the Composition API, Jeremy has an excellent YouTube video on the Angular YouTube channel. And there's another one from Jessica on standalone components as well. Ultimately, our goal is to help put the user at the center while reducing the friction for building great experiences on the web. And Web Vitals are a great way to help quantify or put a number on the user experience for your website. And the metrics that make up core Web Vitals usually evolve over time. And the current set actually focuses on loading, so that's the largest contentful paint, interactivity, first input delay, and visual stability, the cumulative layout shift. And particularly in Angular, we have collaborated with the Chrome Aurora team to investigate and improve core Web Vitals for Angular projects at large. And one of our recent focuses has been improving largest contentful paint, so LCP. And one of the first things that we see is that 71% to 79% of pages that had an LCP element, that element was actually an image. So that gave us a lot of good focus to really further dig into how can we improve images so that all Angular applications have good defaults for good core Web Vitals. So we wanted to make it easy to adopt performance best practices for loading images. And particularly, we focus on intelligent lazy loading, on prioritization of critical images, optimized configuration for popular image tooling, and providing built-in errors and warnings as developers build applications. In your applications today, as of v15, you can use the new image directive by updating your image source to use ng source. And you can immediately see improvements to your core web vitals for your applications. The other bits are around setting up an image CDN so that you benefit from serving images in some of the more modern formats and reduce size there as well. Check out our developer guide for more info, and feel free to use it today. Looking ahead, there's a couple explorations that are top of mind for the team. We're looking at how we can continue to improve our documentation. We've made significant progress this year by upgrading some of the guides related to dependency injection, for example, and we're working on the components guide. But we know that there's more that we can do related to our initial learning journey. We also want to make sure that we have excellent usability of the docs and that there's consistency of presentations of different types of topics that you might find on the Angular website. We're also improving server-side rendering. Some of the areas that we're focusing on are kind of implementing non-destructive hydration. We want to add standalone support in Angular Universal, which is our server-side rendering tool, ESM support, and we want to continue to improve the dev server experience. And finally, we're exploring reactivity and asking questions like, can we have per component or per view change detection? Can we have zoneless Angular? And can we have computed properties? But most importantly, we're exploring all of these topics with the priority of evolving Angular while also maintaining platform stability and bringing everyone along. And maintaining the properties of an opinionated framework that includes the knobs so that developers can use it in a way that exactly fits their needs. Thank you so much.